Shalom. Today, still continuing with the preparation for the parasha, and the main topic for this Torah portion is the red heifer. Now, the red heifer is one of those paradoxes that occurs in Scripture where it's difficult to interpret that. Now, we that has the revelation of Mashiach, it's easy for us to connect to the red heifer just for the mere fact that Yeshua's crucifixion took place on the spot where the red heifer was normally sacrificed outside the city, and there was a bridge and line of sight. You could see the temple, the entrance to the temple, and you can see right into the Holy of Holies after the veil was torn. So the fulfillment of Mashiach and his sacrifice, linking it to the red heifer. But not only that, it also links to the 2 goat offerings of Yom Kippur. And it also relates to the Passover lamb. Basically, the sacrifice of Mashiach represents all the sacrifices and the whole sacrificial system and the fulfillment thereof. There's no more need for a sacrifice other than the sacrifice of Messiah. The future sacrifices, now there's a couple mentioned, I know in Zechariah 14 at the end of the chapter, it also refers to an offering or sacrifice that's brought, and that is not for a sin sacrifice. It's not for the atonement, but it's rather a gift, an offering, like a barbecue where you celebrate, like a feast. It's that kind of sacrifice. It's still performed by the people assigned to do the sacrificial system, to perform those actions, and they serve the people by doing that. So that on the one hand, and then the paradoxes is what I want to just touch on this morning. Now, a paradox is something where you say one thing but it means something else. Now, there's a psalm, I can't remember where it is, that says that Yahweh revealed one thing or says one thing but revealed 2 things. So there's more than one outcome of what Yahweh is saying in his word. Not only that, sometimes these meanings can be opposite of one another. It's like the object with its shade that gives it context. So if you meditate on the object and also on the object's counterpart or opposite, it gives you the fullness of that object. And the word kadosh is one of those meanings. That means holiness, and it also means temple prostitute, male temple prostitute. Now, male and temple, if you just look at those 2, it's the priest and the priesthood. Prostitute means that they use the spiritual things like in the form of adultery, and it's normally associated with idol worship. And we've got a good example when the kings of Israel separated in the time of Solomon's son, where Rehoboam and Jeroboam split up, and the southern kingdom and the northern kingdom were separated. Now the northern kingdom, they built their own temples because they didn't want to go down to Jerusalem, and then they filled the temple or created idols or brought idol worship into the temple to perverse Yahweh's word through their deception and misunderstanding and mingling with the nations. And that is what a male temple prostitute is if you take Yahweh's things and you pollute it with idol worship, bringing idols in, bringing the ways of the nations into worship. Now, just looking at the word itself, if you read the word in Hebrew and you translate the word, sometimes there's vowel points that you can change, and that gives a total different meaning, sometimes an opposing meaning, and that's a paradox. Now, in general, anything spiritual is paradoxal. And the best example of that is the 7th plague of hail and fire, because the one can destroy the other. Water can put out fire, and fire can evaporate water. But yet Yahweh put them in the same space to create judgment that come upon man. And that's the concept of bringing heaven and earth together, where the light and the darkness now sort of intermingle, and light and darkness cannot exist in the same plane. But in the paradoxal sense of this, the coming of Yahweh coming back to restore His creation, to restore the heavens, restore the earth, and restore His people, that's where His light will interface and interact with the darkness, and the darkness will exist in the same plane as the light. And that is the same paradoxal concept. Now, when you read the Torah, you'll note that if you go to the original Torah scrolls, there's no vowel points inserted. Now, the consonants or the black letters are seen as male, and the vowel points are seen as female. And the female interact with the male, so the reader inserts the vowel points or the interpretation of the text while interacting with the word. And a special message for that reader will unfold. So the Torah is actually a code that an individual can interact with to get a message that is tailor-made and specific for that person. It's very personal. That's how Yahweh can speak to individuals through His scripture. And it's even more powerful through the Hebrew language. So I'm just going to leave you with those few thoughts. Now, the red heifer is one of those paradoxical topics, and we're going to explore that in context of our storyline with the enemies, with wine press, with 1,000 years, and the new cycle, and all of that still coming to play with the symbolism seen within the context of the red heifer. So I'll leave you with that. I hope you have a wonderful day, and shalom.